Good evening and welcome. On behalf of Pennsylvanians Against the Death Penalty, I'm Kathleen Lucas and I'm the Chief Cook and Bottle Washer here. Our co-hosts are Amnesty International USA, the Atlantic Center for Capital Representation, Death Penalty Policy Project, and Witness to Innocence. I'm very excited to have our guests with us this evening, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a moment. I want to point out that at the bottom of your screens, you should see a question mark in a little white box, and it says Q&A. You should be able to post questions in there, and either I will be able to answer them in text, or our guests will be able to answer them. So feel free to use the Q&A. I think, okay, here we go. All right, Jim, let's start with you.
Okay, well, good evening. My name's Jim Moreno. I'm a recovering death penalty defense attorney. I've represented death sentenced individuals for over 30 years in 11 different states. I spent 25 years as an assistant federal defender in the Capital Habeas Unit in Philadelphia, and that's where I met Daniel. I was assigned his case. It was either 1999 or 2000. He had only been convicted and sentenced to death in 94, so his case was still relatively new. He was a young man, and yeah, we had a team of, there were two lawyers. We had an investigator. We had a paralegal, Marcia White, who was friends with Daniel for many, many years. And we worked long and hard on his case and got nowhere for 20 or so years. We even switched up his legal team some, put some new lawyers on the case. He was represented by a couple of new lawyers, and then in the end, when he was ultimately released, he was represented by Gretchen Engel and Carl Schwartz. And so it really was it took a village to work Daniel's case to get it to where it ended up. And it really ended up where it did as an exoneration in large part because Philadelphia elected a district attorney who had integrity and changed up the way capital cases were handled in Philadelphia and opened up files that we'd been trying to get for years and years. In Daniel's case, those files that were ultimately released to defense counsel revealed evidence that we'd been asking for 20 years, evidence that in court, the prosecutor stated on the record before a judge that the evidence that they looked and the evidence didn't exist. And sure enough, and I think it was around 2022 when we got access to the files, or when Daniel's then lawyers got access to the files, this exonerating evidence came forward or was there, and they were able to utilize it to secure his release. So it really was by the grace of getting a district attorney with integrity that changed the culture of how capital cases were handled in Philadelphia. You know, Philadelphia was known for two very common denominators in capital cases in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania generally were prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel. In Daniel's case, he had both. There was prosecutorial misconduct. They withheld evidence of a third party alternate suspect who had actually been the description fit what the witnesses had identified. Um, and they suppressed the evidence, and they actually presented false evidence in court. Their story about how Danny was linked to the case was a complete lie, and that didn't come out definitively until 2022 when the files were opened up, and the position that they'd been taking for years in open court turned out to be false. Danny's was another case. I've had many like this, or a handful anyway, of a false confession. Danny was interrogated when he was under the influence of crack. He had been a long-standing crack addict at that time, even though he was quite a young man. And the state conceded in the end that many of the facts that he told the police really didn't match the evidence or the crime scene evidence or anything that the witnesses had said. There were too many inconsistencies in his statement to really put a lot of weight behind it. Nonetheless, it did provide grounds for a conviction and his death sentence. The other common denominator in Daniel's case was ineffective assistance of counsel. Pennsylvania has had over 300 reversals of death sentences over the years, and about 160 of them have been for ineffective assistance of counsel. And in Philadelphia, Danny's lawyer was a court-appointed lawyer who was a man who appeared in many of our cases at the Chew. We saw his cases regularly, and they fit the same pattern year in and year out. Didn't matter the case name. He did the same thing, which was basically nothing. He didn't investigate. He didn't hire mitigation specialists. He didn't hire experts. He rarely met with his client. Danny can tell you better than I, but I only think he met with him a handful of times at most. Um, and part of the reason the lawyer behaved that way is because Philadelphia incentivized poor representation by their fee structure. So in Philadelphia, at the time Danny's case went to trial, lawyers who handled capital cases were paid a flat rate of $2,000. That flat rate, that's all they got. They got $400 a day in court if they were in court for more than 4 hours. If they were in court for less than 4 hours, they got $200 an hour. And even if they worked a 14-hour day on a day they were in court, they only got paid for $400. Um, so if you, in 1989, there was a survey done by the ABA and of the capital defense attorneys across the country, and they estimated that they spent between 400 and 500 hours a year, not a year, excuse me, each case representing a capital defendant. That's a very low number. Today, the ABA guidelines on capital representation are anywhere from 1,800 to 2,500 hours, attorney hours, to adequately represent somebody. But even if you take 400 hours and a $2,000 fee, that's $5 an hour. If you worked 400 hours, which his lawyer didn't, but if he had worked 400 hours at a $2,000 paycheck, that's $5 an hour. I'm not sure that was minimum wage in 1994, but certainly not today. Today, Philadelphia hasn't gotten much better. They pay their capital lawyers up on the appointed bar 10,000, hang on, number $10,600. So if you take the 10,600 by 1,000, that comes out to $10.60 an hour, which is crazy. If you worked $2,000, 2,000 hours at 10,600, you would make $5.30 an hour. That's the current pay structure in Pennsylvania for capital cases. The Atlantic Center for Capital Representation challenged the fee structure in Pennsylvania. They filed a very comprehensive lawsuit. There was a special master appointed who wrote findings recommending that Pennsylvania moved to a fee base, an hourly, excuse me, an hourly rate, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejected it. And so lawyers are still paid this abysmally low rate to represent people where the stakes are the highest. So that's what Danny faced when he was arrested. And, not surprisingly, in my opinion anyway, even though it wasn't a factor reported in his case, race was a factor as well. And despite the fact that this country is lurching to the right and pretending DEI shouldn't exist and that racism didn't happen or it doesn't still exist, the way Danny was arrested in this case just was tinged with racism. The man was walking down the street in Philadelphia at 4 o'clock in the morning, minding his own business, and a cop saw him and stopped him and detained him and put him in the back of the car because he was a black man walking down the street in Philadelphia. They had no probable cause to stop him. They weren't responding to any calls. He didn't fit the description of any suspect. He wasn't armed. He was black and walking down the street in a high crime area at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they detained him, which to me is outrageous. It wasn't an issue in his trial, but it's hard for me to believe that if I had been walking down that same street at that same time at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would have been detained by the Philadelphia Police Department. We know race is still a big factor in capital cases. The statistics are still quite scary. You're 2.6 times more likely to be convicted and sentenced to death if you kill a white person as opposed to a black person. Those statistics are not changing. So race is still a big factor. Although other than the arrest, I don't really know uh, its role, other than in Philadelphia itself. When Pennsylvania once had the fourth largest death row. Philadelphia had 131 people on the row, and 101 of them were African American. Um, Currently, the row is, I think, at about 100, maybe a little less, but I think it might be at about 100. And Philadelphia has 19 people still on the row. So, those are those are kind of the background, on Danny's case. Now, the prosecutorial misconduct in Philadelphia is actually the leading county on prosecutorial misconduct reversals in the entire country. I think Philadelphia has had since 1983 150 reversals for prosecutorial misconduct, which is incredible. No, excuse me, 150 reversals and for wrongful convictions, and 55% of those were because of prosecutorial misconduct. So Danny became an artist in prison. I think it saved his life. He would paint Christmas cards that he would sell to his lawyers and other friends around the holidays to make money for commissary, to make money for his art supplies, which really was like food for him, because I really do think it kept him sane. He was always working on getting his pictures in art shows. He had some contacts on the outside who are still taking him under his wing today and working with him. But art really, I think, saved Danny's life. He was one of the more grounded people I represented. He was a joy, and I'm just thrilled that he has ended up out. And again, it took a village. There were a lot of really good lawyers and investigators and paralegals who worked hard on his case. And Danny never lost faith, at least as far as I could tell. So he's been out for a little over a year. He's done a ton in that time. He's had his ups and downs, as you would expect for somebody who spent 30 years living in a 10 by 7 cement and steel box, locked down 23 out of 24 hours a day on average. That he is as intact as he is a real testament to the work he did while he was inside to try to maintain his sanity. And I should let him know that I probably will never talk this nicely about him again. Um,
Oh,
but
yes, you will.
but anyway, Danny, this is your story, so go ahead, buddy. Let folks know what you went through.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Gwynn. I'm a certified peer specialist. I am exonerated artist 197, and I am also a minister now. I'm also a teacher. Um, and really, I am poorly a spiritual artist because what I paint is really my story, and how I can try to present it to the world and hopefully help people connect with their own trauma and experiences and try to find their way through it like I did. I can't really tell anyone how to live, but, I can show them that, it is possible to get to the other side. Now, I did 30 years incarcerated on death row for 28 of those years for a crime that I did not commit. Philadelphia tried to kill me, without no remorse. Um, and it was very difficult. I was a drug addict, struggling with my issues about childhood and not understanding, why my life was so difficult. Why didn't I have two parents? You know, why, my father abandoned me, why my mother abandoned me and left me with my grandmother who was aging. And she did not have the strength to, handle a young man like myself who didn't know how to be a man at that time. So I, fell in with the wrong crowd. Um, I did not know how to deal with my growing pains. So I followed the crowd, got involved with drugs, got involved with getting in trouble, not going to school, things like that. But also, the education system at that time did not provide the proper tools or even incentivize us to go to school and get an education because we lacked space, we lacked books, we lacked curriculum. I mean, I tried to get into a program and then they told me I couldn't have that program. I had to take something else. So when I went and took that program and I said, oh, I kind of like this. And then they said the following year, I couldn't take that no more. I had to take something else. I'm like, man, but how am I supposed to actually learn something and, stick with it if y'all throwing me all around the place? But anyway, I turned to drugs and eventually I got picked up by the police for something, you know, as minor as bench warrant, which later I come to find out was a ruse so they can get me in there and get me to confess to an arson murder that I knew nothing about. At the time, being, a drug addict and, not in my right mind, I was very malleable and they was easily convincing me through coercion, to say what they needed me to say, just enough to get me to go to trial and convict
Danny, what was your drug of choice at that time?
me. At that time, it was crack cocaine. Crack
What
cocaine,
what, what does crack do to you? How does that impact you? I know that
crack
sounds like a silly
cocaine,
question, but for those of us who don't know, what's that like?
crack cocaine is a stimulant that races your heart, that you know accelerates your sense of awareness. It overstimulates you in some areas, but it also it dulls your senses. It was an escape from my reality.
But it became an addiction, right?
Yes, yes, it became an addiction I was stuck in for 10 years. And I didn't know how to get out of that. I mean, people try to wake me up and like, hey, man, you're unkept. You're not taking care of yourself. You dropping out of school. Um, you're not keeping employment. I mean, I would get a job, but then I wouldn't keep the job for very long because as soon as I get a paycheck, I'm running to go get high, and then I'm missing my work day. Um, and then there was a lot of crime, vagrancy in the neighborhood that I would get blamed for because I was in that element. You
Yeah, well,
know,
my recollection also is that, you would kind of steal anything that wasn't nailed down, so that
yes,
you could go and buy more crack. That's my recollection.
yes, it was. It was. I was stealing from my family. I
Right.
mean, it was so bad that they left me in the house by myself and they moved away because when they would try to lock me out of the house so I couldn't get in and steal anything, I would find my way back in the house and they just got fed up and moved out. They didn't want to, incarcerate me. They didn't want to throw me to the wolves, to the police. So they just up and left. So I was in my grandmother's house by myself. Um, there was people in the neighborhood who, tried to look out for me, tried to encourage me to get away from that stuff. But the drug was very addictive. But I think for me, it was more so addictive because I was in so much pain and I didn't know how to see my way through it.
Yeah.
So
How
when
old were you when you were arrested?
24,
24. Okay.
I was 24 at the time. And when I went through my trial, I didn't understand what I was going through, and I relied on my attorney, to get me through this. 'Cause I'm like, yo, I didn't do this. And all he could say was, well, hey, man, you confessed, and I'm gonna try to get you some numbers instead of letters, meaning that instead of getting life or the death penalty, he was going to try to get me 20 to 30, something like that, you know. And his strategy wasn't very sound because he tried to convince them that I was too high at the time to commit the crime. But the problem with his defense theory was it lacked substance. It didn't have any evidence. He didn't present any evidence to back it up. I mean, there was plenty of evidence. All he
Well,
didn't do was
he
talk to
didn't
my community.
investigate, right?
No, he did not.
No,
I
he didn't
mean,
hire an
he
investigator.
wait a minute. No, he did hire an investigator, but the investigator went out there for one day, and he did not talk to the people that I sent him to. He went to the person's house, said they wasn't there, and left. But the person had stepped away for a minute to go to the store. However, he did get to speak with one lady, Marsha Baldwin, who was one of my alibi witnesses. But instead of asking her the questions about the alibi, he asked the other stupid stuff, and then came back and said he ain't have anything. So
And how often did your lawyer meet with you?
not very often,
Right. Not very often.
because he didn't like making the trip to the prison. So I would say like a handful of times, in the course of a year,
I was
I
about to
might have
ask, how
seen
long was it from arrest to trial? Do you remember?
a year,
A year.
a year.
That's pretty
Yeah,
quick.
because because it was in '94 when I was arrested, and then '95 of that, the following year, around the same month, I went to trial and was convicted. The trial didn't last very long because my attorney did not put much of a fight up against the onslaught of bogus evidence that the DA presented. You know, um, I mean, he even talked me out of a legal strategy that probably would have saved my life, which was to ask or compel the DA to produce the photo lineup that they claimed that I was in.
Well, the prosecutors actually, Mandel he did ask about that. And what the state said was, we don't have it. It's gone. They lied.
Yes, they lied,
They lied.
but as we know, what 25 years later, that um, by compelling them to turn over, this evidence, the police documents, the records, it was there. All he had to do was keep pounding on them about, well, let us have the police files. Let us have this. They wouldn't even let us have the police files at that time, even though the law said that we were entitled to it. So, I mean, shows you how much he knew. At the time, I think those attorneys that represented capital cases were not learned in how to represent a capital case.
Oh, they certainly
And
weren't. They certainly
and
weren't.
and at that time, there was only one attorney assigned to a capital case.
Correct. There were no penalty. You did not have a penalty phase lawyer, which
No,
today, a capital case is you get to at least two lawyers, one for the guilt phase, one for the penalty phase.
yeah,
You just had one guy.
yeah, one guy doing it all. Um, I mean, the investigation was lacking, the legal argument was lacking, didn't have any substance, didn't have any evidence to support it. So, I mean, it was like the jury had no choice but to convict me. And
Well, that
then when
guy,
it,
that lawyer has a long list of clients who were on Pennsylvania's death row. I'm not sure how many of his clients have been not exonerated, but got off the row, because most have. But that your guy. You had a lot of company on the row of people who were represented by him.
Oh yeah, because around the time when I started doing my legal research, right, thanks to Harold Wilson, Omir Abu Jamal, Ronald Gibson, they put the law books in my hand, and said, you got to get to work. You got to work on your own case. So when I started doing that, one of the things that I did was I looked up the attorney's name and looked at his record. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I know that guy. He's down that way. Wait a minute. I know that guy right there. He's over there. So we all started talking. And when we started talking, we discovered that he had the same errors in all of our cases. He failed to investigate,
That
you
was his
know?
MO. We had him in countless cases, and it was always the same.
Yeah.
And for $2,000 for a flat fee, he wasn't going to do any work.
But he really didn't have to do that much work if he was knowledgeable in what he was doing. Talk to I look, I wrote down a list of names of people that I could recall who I came in contact with that weekend. It wouldn't have took no more than an hour, maybe a phone call to any one of those individuals that would have put him on the right track to my innocence. He could have built an alibi defense, but he didn't. You know. So
So, Danny, when you
then,
were sentenced to death, did you feel like you did the gravity of it register with you in that moment? Like you'd been clean for about a year now, right? You'd been in prison. You'd been in the you were at the were you at a pick?
yes, I was
So,
at Pick. I was going through the drug rehab program, and um, I got myself clean. I
right.
went and got my GED. You know,
Oh, you
so I
did that at
was
pick?
yes, I
Oh,
did
that's
all that
awesome.
at Pick. The problem was that I got convicted. And then I got sentenced to be executed. And I was like, whoa, what the heck is going on? I said, I don't believe this. So I tried to kill myself. I called my cousin, Michelle Dotson, and I told her that I was getting ready, I was just wanted to call home and say goodbye. And she was like, what's wrong with you? And I told her, man, I was like, I'm in here and these people trying to kill me for something that I don't believe I did, but I can't remember this or I can't remember that. And, the lawyer is telling me I got this confession here and there's no way that I'm going to get around it. So then my cousin told me, yo, wake up, man. What's wrong with you? You was here with us, right? They were my alibi. Her then boyfriend, and my neighbor. And this is the list of names that I gave my attorney that he never investigated.
Mhm.
So
So,
that
Danny,
really
when you were
pissed
on
me off.
trial, did anyone from the family come and support you?
Yes, but they didn't know what to do. They didn't because we're not learned in the law.
Sure.
We don't try to bother ourselves about the law because we don't see ourselves getting jammed up like this. So we don't know that we have the right to remain silent, that we have the right to an attorney and things like that. All we know is that, you know, um, we can try to argue against them that we're innocent, but what can you do when the deck is stacked against you? You give up.
So Pick,
And
you were at Pick, and then and Pick that's the county prison, right? Well, what's that stand for?
yes, oh, I do not know what it stands for.
But
I'm sorry.
that's the county prison.
Yes, it's the county prison.
Okay. All right. And then from there, when after you were sentenced to death, what happened?
Well, like I said, I got mad and I was transported to first I was transported to um
Huntington?
no, not Huntington. It was the other prison, Graterford.
Oh,
I was
Greater.
transferred to Graterford. Then I went to Camp Hill. And that's where I met some other individuals who also had Lee Mandel as an attorney, and we were sharing our war stories on the gate. Um, and then I went to SCI Green. Now there, that's where I'm, walking through the halls. I'm hearing people moaning and groaning, and um, it was horrifying
And that was one of
walking
the
through
that
those
was one of the
halls.
two death rows.
Yes,
Yeah, green.
yes, it
Okay.
was.
Yeah.
And they was trying to make that the primary one by squeezing everybody in there in those single cells and keeping us locked down.
So when you say kept locked down, tell people what that means.
23 hours a day, Monday through Friday, I stayed in my cell. And on the
Did you get out at
weekends,
all?
1 hour a day, Monday
Okay.
through Friday.
And what did you get to do in that hour?
In that hour, we got to come out to the yard. It was a single cage, um, and top, sides, all around. You was locked in, and it was like dog kennels, all lined up,
Was it
and
grass or concrete?
all concrete,
Okay.
all concrete.
So
And
you
there was
couldn't
no
touch
exercise
grass.
equipment in there. There was no games or anything in there. We had to buy our own deck of cards or board game, that we were permitted to take out with us that we could probably play chess or checkers or cards with individuals that was in the neighboring cage.
So were you in a cage by yourself then for yard?
Yes,
So it was one
yes.
person in the cage. So you couldn't do anything with anybody else in one of those cages.
No, you cannot. Not in the beginning.
Okay.
But then after a couple of years, that changed, and they allowed two people to enter a cage at the same time for recreation. Um, we also did get to come out of the cell for the law library. Um, that was for an hour in the beginning, then and went to 2 hours.
And how many times a week could you sign up for the law library?
Well, it depends on the rotation because there was only 4 cages. I mean, actual tiny cages, no bigger than a telephone booth, where you had a desk, where you had a chair, and then on the outside, there were books that we could not reach. We had to call for a law librarian. And when the librarian came down, he could only stay down there long enough to hand you a book and leave. So if you got the wrong book, you were stuck until you found a guard to let the librarian back out, to sort through the books for you again.
Well, how did you do research? How did you know what book to get?
Well, in the beginning, I was just given a book by Harold Wilson, and Mumia, he directed me to certain books. Said, look, pick this book up first, right? Read through it, which was one was the Constitution, the Pennsylvania Constitution. Another one was the law, a law journal, Georgetown Law Journal. And going through the Georgetown Law Journal, I will look at certain topics that fit an idea I had of an error that was in my case that I perceived. And one of the things, though, that I did in the beginning under the instruction of Harold Wilson and Mamiya was to read my case and then, see what don't fit, see what doesn't sit right. So I did that. And then they taught me how to take that and then go to the library and see where those errors fit. So I discovered the ineffectiveness of counsel in the beginning because he failed to investigate. He failed to interview witnesses. Um, Man, the defense that he put on, he failed to present any evidence to support that.
Well, he didn't put on any defense. He didn't put on any evidence. He just cross-examined witnesses rather poorly, is my recollection.
Right. But his legal argument was that I was so high at the time that I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
That was his legal argument. So one of the things that he did when he cross-examined all of the witnesses, he kept asking them how often did they see me getting high? How often, uh, did I, frequent the place? How how did my reactions were, stuff like, things like that, and my demeanor, you know,
Well, the problem with
or my
that, Daniel,
reactions
is
in
he
the
put
first
you
place.
at the scene when your argument was you weren't there.
Correct.
Yeah.
But he kept placing me there.
Right.
And I thought that, okay, he knows what he's doing. He's doing what he needs to do, whatever legal, trickery or maneuvering or whatever, defense he's trying to put on, that, he's going to get me the numbers that he promised, and not the letters, because he said because of the confession, I was pretty much stuck. There was nothing I can do. But thankfully, I did my own research, after I was sentenced, and I was able to communicate with my appellate attorney, my direct appeal attorney, Mr. Silverman. And me and him was on the same page about a lot of things, a lot of errors that was in my case. But he was incapable of supporting the arguments that we laid forward, the claims that we were making, because he did not have the resources to go find the supporting evidence to back up my claims. My
Well, and the
claims
problem
of
Danny had at that time was he was your appellate lawyer. And so on appeal, he can't present new evidence.
that is true.
He can only argue errors that are contained in the record, the trial transcripts. He's stuck with you just, looking for errors in the record. He can't at that stage do an investigation and come in with new evidence on your behalf. Um, that's where your PCRA lawyers came in.
Right. But even though he could not come in with introducing new evidence, what he could do was he could argue the reason why counsel was ineffective, because this here existed, that here existed. So those are little things that I saw that, I was like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? But the law was the law. And on
Law is
top
the
of that,
law.
um, the Supreme Court, they decided the arrest was one of the claims that we made. The arrest was illegal. Even the trial judge said that the arrest was improper, but it was cured by the outstanding bench warrants that were found during the police encounter. That's what the trial judge said. But then when you go to the Supreme Court, they said the um, the stop was proper because of some police radio call that took place maybe an hour or so ago. I don't know the exact timing on that, but because of that, that justified an investigative stop. That justified this white police officer stopping me 4 o'clock in the morning, throwing me up against the fence, handcuffing me to the fence while he ransacked my
Your
backpack
backpack. Yeah.
looking for my identification. And then he took me off of the fence, handcuffed, and threw me in the back of the police vehicle and locked the door while he called in for the warrants and called for backup. So Supreme Court said all that was proper. And the reason why they did that, in my opinion, is because they knew the encounter was improper. They knew that the bench warrants did not cure that improper conduct, that police encounter. But by saying that there was a police radio call that something transpired in the vicinity, that justified the investigative stop. So
Yeah, well, they
therefore,
had, you're right though, Danny. They had
yeah,
absolutely no justification for that stop. None.
right. So if the stop was unjustified, improper, all the evidence that they found, the matches, the lighters, the confession, all of that would have been thrown out. It would have been suppressed. So the Supreme Court said, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, oh, it wasn't improper. There was a police radio call, that something was afoot down there. So, it was proper. Even though there was no description of anybody, you know. So,
So
but
you
yeah,
landed at Green. Green was a pretty terrible place. Tell us a little about Green, what that was like.
that was horrible in the sense that there was no privacy.
Yeah.
Food was horrible, often cold, um, often small portions.
Did you sell
Uh,
about 10 by 7? Is that about a fair dimension?
yes, that's about a fair dimension.
And in that was a bed, the toilet combination with a sink on top of it, and what did you guys have a desk bolted to the floor or wall?
Yes, everything was metal.
Right. So you hardly had any room to walk in there.
No, you can pace back and forth. You listen. When you're in a dire situation like that, you find a way to try to stay healthy. So, you know, sit ups, calisthenics, in a small cramped space. I found a way, to try to stay healthy in there. The guards were racist. They were determined to drive you crazy, or they constantly wanted a reason to throw you in a hole or give you a write up so you would lose privileges. Uh, the phone calls, we would only allow one phone call a week at one time, and the phone calls were so expensive. I mean, you really had to save up for that. $15 for one phone call.
And how long was your phone call you were allowed?
The phone calls at that time was like 5 or 10 minutes in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I really didn't have too many people to call. The only person I could really call was my grandmother
Right.
at
Right.
that time. And I couldn't stress her out about what I was going through. So I had to hold all that in. I really didn't have nobody to talk to.
Right. So you would call
And
our office a lot. You would talk to different folks on your team.
yes, the attorneys, of course, because they
Yeah.
knew what the deal was.
And
But I couldn't
Marcia, you
tell
could
my
talk with
family.
Marcia and yeah.
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 I talked with Marcia. I talked with you, Joe Thornton, Renee Edelman,
Yep. Yep. Matt was on
Matt, yeah,
yeah.
Matthew Steigler. I talked with all of you in the beginning about what I was going through, what I was experiencing. And one of my saving graces was that you were able to help me get art supplies, to find myself, because that was one of the things that, even during the trial, I was sitting throughout the whole entire trial. There was nothing I can do, so I was in there sketching the whole court scene. Um, so when I got on death row, one of the persons that handed me an art book and art supplies was Mumia,
Hmm.
because he saw that with just a pencil, I had some talent. So he gave me some books and said, "Look, man, I can see, see what you can do with that." So I took it, and there was no classes that I could go to, because the one thing about death row, they do not want you to educate yourself.
There's no
They do
programming.
not.
Is that correct?
There's no programming. There's no classes. There's no self improvement, programs. When you talk to the counselor, they, pretend to sympathize with you, but there's nothing they can do, because they have to fall in line with the administration, which is to just warehouse you until it's your time to die.
Now, Daniel,
And my
Green,
warrant did get signed.
yeah,
Remember, my warrant did get signed.
yeah, yeah, I
And
remember.
and with that, I was stripped of whatever property I had, which was a TV, my art supplies, my bedding, my clothes, my skate boots, and they gave me these little slides, these little canvas slides to put on. No socks. They gave me a jumpsuit and one pair of underwear, and they put me inside of a cell, cold cell, and I was able to get a book so I could read in there to pass the time. But there was an officer on the other side of the gate constantly watching me. And then after a while, they put a camera on the door so they can watch you while they sit in the luxury of their office. And if I needed something, I would have to call the officer, and the officer would have to fill out this form, saying that he was giving me a book or he was turning on the TV that was outside of the cage. And I would have to stand at the door, to watch the television program. Um, I was isolated from the rest of the population, who was, in their cells across the way. I had a whole side of the unit to myself.
And
Now,
that was until the stay was signed, right?
that was until the stay was signed. Yes. But it was always close calls, even though people tried to reassure me saying, yo, man, it's only your first warrant. They're gonna get a stay. They ain't gonna kill you, so don't sweat it too much. But I thought it was just, hype. I thought it was just, a way to comfort me, in a time where I thought that I was actually, gonna die, you know. But outside of the warrant getting signed, I thought I was going to die every single day of my life in there, of my existence, actually, not my life, but my existence, because every day was a new day to try to find a glimmer of hope, try to find something to cling on to, whether it's someone, comforting voice on the other side of a phone call, or whether you find someone like Harold Wilson, like Mumia Abu Jamal, like Craig Murphy, like Ronald Gibson, who is able, to encourage you to hang on just a little bit longer. And they would do that by providing me the tools to educate myself. They also provided me tools like the art supplies to help me heal myself. Because through art, I was able to communicate the pain that I was feeling, the trauma that I experienced as a child. I didn't understand that stuff. I didn't even think I had any childhood trauma until I started painting myself, walking down the street with my book bag, trying to go to school to get an education. But I'm walking past drug dealers, people that's on the corner gambling with, guns in their pocket, prostitutes up in the alleyway, you know, selling themselves right in front of us. And then there's drug paraphernalia everywhere, you know. And then there was another time where, that I was being accosted by the gang members who wanted me to join their gangs. And if I didn't join their gangs, then they would chase me back and forth from school every day. You know, at first, at that time, I thought it was a game, even though it was a traumatic experience. I thought it was a game, trying to take the long way, to get from school to home, dodging the gangs, dodging the bullets and things like that. Coming to school the next day to find out the guy, the young kid, the preteen, he was only probably about 13 years old. He died, because of the gang violence, because he got caught in the crossfire walking down the street, going home from school. Things like that. I didn't understand that what I was experiencing back in that time was really affecting me mentally. So the artwork helped me bring that out and bring that to life. And, in that, I was able to heal myself, because it brought, those feelings to the surface and to my consciousness. And I started questioning it. And I'm like, is that right? No, that's not right. It's not right for a young child to lose out on an opportunity to be educated, to become something, to find his talent, and to be, a contribution to his community instead of, a menace to society. I mean, I couldn't even walk down the street without the police officers accosting me, trying to get me to sell their drugs or trying to stick me up to take whatever money I got in my pocket, thinking I'm a drug dealer. So, yes, art, it really saved my life. And then now we go through, the appellant process, you know, where every day I'm sitting up there thinking, yeah, I finally got something, a claim that I could take to the courts, right? That's going to overturn this thing. And I'm running back and forth to you and the team. And I'm like, hey, I found something. Check this out, and the courts would shoot it down. It either didn't have no merit, according to them, or it was untimely. I should have brought it up back during the trial over and over and over and over again. I mean, I even have a piece, where I painted myself as an aging man that's weighed down by the pendulum of time, where I found all these motions, a big giant clock in the background, infinite motions, and all the motions that was filed by my legal team and myself trying to get some of these claims into court,
Oh, Daniel,
saying that,
you're bringing back memories because, we filed tons and tons of things
yeah,
in your case, and they all get denied. Everything gets
and
denied.
and a lot
Denial,
of those
denial,
motions,
denial.
and
You have a
remember a lot of
painting
those
where you have
motions,
all those denials. You have the different
yeah,
years on a piece of paper, and I mean, it was claim after claim after claim, just
yeah.
getting denied.
Well, remember a lot of those motions were petitions for discovery.
Yep.
We was asking for the police files. We was asking for the files that was in the possession of the DA's office.
Well, I got a letter from one of the assistant district attorneys claiming that they looked in their files and the evidence we were looking for didn't exist, and it's the very evidence that was found in 2022 when your file was opened up to your
Yeah,
lawyers. So, you know,
yeah. I remember a lot of
there was a
the
lot of bad stuff.
responses,
There was a lot of bad stuff that went on.
but I remember a lot of their responses was we gave them all that they're entitled to.
Well, they say
And
that as well. They're not
yeah,
entitled to anything else.
and then some of the material that we received, it was unreadable because it was such a bad copy, a copy of a copy, or it was missing a page. You know?
So Daniel, SCI Green, which is where death row was, where you were incarcerated, is really far from Philadelphia. It's like a good 6 hour car ride. And I know, your family situation was very tough, but did that distance make it such that you really, other than legal visits, didn't get many visitors?
Oh my goodness. Well, because we were so far away from the city of Philadelphia, we was literally on the other side of the state.
Correct.
It was like what, 5, 6 hours, a six
Easily.
hour drive to
Yeah,
get there.
we used to fly to Pittsburgh and then
Yeah,
drive to Green, and then after a while we couldn't do that anymore, and we had to drive, and it was a good 6 hours from Philadelphia.
yeah. And
Five,
the
6 hours.
family, my family, couldn't afford to take off work to go all the way down there to see me. And then on top of that, be dissuaded by the staff, not just the guards that was monitoring the death row unit, but I'm talking about the staff that was in the visiting room, the staff that were processing your requests for a visit will always make it so dang on difficult and frustrating for you to get in to see your loved one. You know, my I pretty much didn't want my family to see me. I had to, in order to survive in there, I had to cut myself off emotionally, you know, So I can be able to mentally deal with the crazy that was in there, the racist guards, the abusive guards, the bad food, the other inmates who were pounding on the doors, jumping off the top of their desk, trying to kill themselves by jumping into the toilet, the steel toilet. This guy was, they had to put a helmet on him and a straitjacket to prevent him from hurting himself.
Well,
And then he would,
solitary confinement makes people crazy.
yeah,
That's a known fact. Solitary confinement, and as a matter of fact, laboratory animals are not allowed to be isolated by themselves because it's
yeah,
cruel, and yet we do that to people like you. Somebody who
yeah.
is condemned, they're locked in a box.
And you know what's
Social
crazy
isolation
about that
is a
too?
death sentence.
You know what's crazy about that too? Is that the exact same thing that they was doing to us in solitary confinement, death row, they were doing to terrorists in Guantanamo Bay. It was very, very similar. The
You were
sleep
handcuffed everywhere
deprivation.
you went, correct? Like if you went to the shower, you were handcuffed.
Oh, you don't forget about the strip searches in order to come out of the dang on cell.
Yeah.
You get strip searched to come out of your cell for your cell to be searched. You get strip searched to go to the shower, go to the yard, go to the library, go to a visit, even just to go see the counselor or
Anytime
to
you were
get a
out of your
bandage.
cell, correct?
Every time you come out of your cell, and then you're shackled. You got your wrists bound in front of you, and it's a belt wrapped around you, a leather belt. And then you got your ankles, they're also shackled. And then you're shuffling along in this jumpsuit. First, it was a pinstripe jumpsuit, right? Then they changed it to orange because they wanted to be able to see us and we was running across the field. They wanted to make sure we ain't had nothing else to wear because we did have cocoa brown jumpsuits. I mean, not jumpsuits, sweat clothes, but we weren't allowed to wear that outside of the cell unless we were going to the yard. But then they took that away from us and told us we were only allowed to wear the orange jumpsuits. So we had to wear the orange jumpsuits back and forth. You know, oh my goodness. And the showers were horrible. You're showering behind 50 other guys, and the showers are not clean. They're clean for the first guy, but then you got, say, two, three, maybe 5 or 10 guys ahead of you. There is no in between break to clean the showers, to spray them down, to scrub them down, or anything. So you go on in there, and then you got guys who don't wash, who has completely broke with reality, and they're living in filth. I mean, they got tumbleweeds, big giant hairballs floating around inside of their cells.
Well,
You got,
you had a lot of people who came onto the row with mental illness.
yes,
So you take
I'm
somebody who comes onto the row with mental illness and you lock them in a box. Of course, they're going to go even crazier. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah,
We had one guy, he, slit his wrist and smeared his blood all over the walls.
yeah.
Um, oh man, we had an guards, putting feces in one person's food. Then we will have, some evenings where the doors accidentally popped open because of mechanical errors. So the whole block is opened up. And then next thing you know, people are running around all crazy, and if they got a beef with somebody, you know, they go in and they try to tighten them up, and the guards ain't nowhere to be found. They're probably sitting in the bubble. Take it back in your cell. Take it back in your cell. But they ain't coming out there to make sure you take it back in your cell. They're waiting for the goon squad, all dressed in black, to come over to the unit to rush everybody back in, to chase everybody back in their cell. But in order for them to do that, they have to lock down their blocks before they can leave it to come and tend to what's going on our unit.
Now, Daniel, not only did you deal with all the that mental trauma that you're talking about, but your physical health declined on the row in large part because of the diet and the isolation. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, today, I had sinus infection. I had a bad cough before I got out because of the poor air quality. But now they're pretty much cleared up some, and now they got me on an inhaler because my throat is so irritated by the bad air that I was breathing in there. I have type 2 diabetes, right? I also have high cholesterol, high blood pressure. I have arthritis, and um, and they really messed me up physically in there. But in spite of that, I tried to maintain my health by exercising, by trying to eat right. I thought I was eating right in there,
Well,
but
you were eating the best you could, right? But I mean,
yeah,
those diets, I've had lots of clients who came in fairly physically healthy and they developed diabetes. I've had guys lose limbs, um,
yeah, yeah. I watched a lot
in
of guys
prison.
like that.
Yeah,
One guy, he had a heart attack, and they had to rush him out and fix him up and bring him right back.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I had when I got out, I was like 80 pounds overweight. And I didn't realize it, until I actually got on a real scale and, weighed myself. And, but when I got out, I could not eat human food, the food that was out here in, the regular population
Yeah.
out here. I could not eat for months and I lost weight drastically. I, Today I'm down to like 217, right? But I could not eat. I could not sleep. I was having nightmares. I'm still having nightmares.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are.
I mean, and on the road, there was people hollering and screaming, either because of the crime they committed was so severe that it caused them to break from reality, and now every night they're reliving the crime that they committed. Or you have someone that's reliving the crime, the trauma that he experienced from what happened, even because he might not have committed the crime, but he probably lost a child, a wife, or something, and you know it hurt him so severely that when he's inside, he can't deal with it because he's stuck in a little box, and that's all he can think about is that because they don't provide you any stimulation. You have to buy it. You have to buy a television. The television does not have reception from the antenna. You can only get the cable to make your television work properly. But then that costs money. They kept shooting the price up every year. So they made it difficult. And then there was no job, no employment.
Yeah,
The
if you
way
didn't
I
have
made my
people on the outside who could help you out, you could really end up with nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And one of the blessings from my artwork was that I was able to reach people on the outside who was, kind enough to purchase my artwork, to talk about my artwork and share it with other people who, took interest in me and took pity on me. And they sent me donations and things like that so I could buy more art supplies. So
So
I can
Danny,
also help other individuals.
so
Because
who were the people on the outside who you were able to connect with who helped you in the realm? Because I know you would send your pictures off to art shows,
yes,
and whatnot, and sometimes there were prison art shows that you sent your stuff to, but sometimes there were things you were saving up money so you could mail things out to a private art show. And so who were tell us about how you got connected with people who were able to sort of give you an avenue and a vehicle to have something to look forward to and paint towards and whatnot to kind of keep going.
well, one of the persons that I was blessed to come into contact with that's still friends with me to the day after 25 years is Anne Marie Kirk. She was one of the blessings that I received, um, that she saw my artwork in an art show, and she was, amazed at the depth of the emotions that was in the artwork that she had to contact me. And,
What's
we
the
started.
organization she runs?
Art for Justice.
Okay.
She's with Art for Justice.
And so that
And
was an organization that you were able to work with while you were inside that really helped
yes,
get your paintings out into the world so that other people and sort of led to other pen pals and other contacts, correct?
yes, yes. It was difficult at first because at the time I was for profit. I was trying to make money so I can eat because or buy books so I can educate myself or
Right.
buy supplies. But then as I came to communicate with Anne Marie, I was convinced to, provide my artwork so she could take it to shows and talk to other people and enlighten them about what was taking place behind these walls. I also was able to send some artwork to France, Germany, uh, England, and Switzerland. Um, Mary Vaughan in England, she was operating the pen pal service from the Human Rights Organization. And she helped me sell cards over there. She helped me find a pen friend over there, who I'm still friends with to this day. You know, then there's uh, Switzerland, Claudia Tremier. She was with LifeSpark. And with that organization, also with my artwork, they were able to find people who were interested in communicating with me, and also um, in France. I have friends in France. I
Sounds like that
got
was a
my
real lifeline.
yes, it was.
Yeah.
It
Now you were just
was.
talking about some of your art. Do you have any on hand that you can show easily or you know?
Um, I'm not that tech savvy, so uh I cannot drum up any artwork for you. I'm
Okay, that's
sorry.
cool. I was just thinking, you were
Daniel,
talking about your artwork. I just, I'm sure that people would, be very interested to see.
Well, right now, I think we should allow some questions to come into play.
That sounds good.
and
Let's
we have many questions. It's Kathleen again. Hello. Um, and if you would like, I can see if I can find some of your art to show, but no promises. I'm not the tech wizard here. But can I ask you some questions in the meantime?
absolutely.
All right. Question number one is: would you tell us about Jim?
Huh.
Oh, Jim was this character who I would more so relate to. Who was it? Harrison Ford or Kevin Costner. He came in all laid back. You know, I like, nah, he can't be a lawyer, but you know, he was very approachable, with my own ideas about things. He listened to me, and that's one of the key things that makes a good attorney, whether I'm right or wrong about my, assumptions about things, whether I think it's an issue or not. He listened to me and he, you know, walked with me, through the pros and cons of my ideas. He he's been a good friend for wow, what, 29 years?
Getting up there.
um,
Yeah, getting up there.
he's been in my corner. He's been a not just a legal advocate, but also um, an advocate of spirit, of friendship, true friendship, and that's hard to find in this world. I mean, look, the best example is when I came home, right? And I was having a breakdown, a mental breakdown. And I called him in a panic. I crying, I got to get out of here. He said, I'll be right there. And he came right down that day, picked me up, and took me out to the country for the weekend where I was able to decompress. And, he came up with a plan to help me for when I went back home. So I didn't have to live in the situation that I was in that caused me to have to break down. Now, when I was on the road, he took my phone call. He would stop what he was doing. I'm in the middle of writing this legal brief, but I got a few minutes for you. Um, he came and visited me when he didn't have to. 6 hour drive to come up there to see me and just said, I was just thinking about you, so I thought I'd come up here and visit you. Even though we couldn't have contact visits, we were in a booth that was that had a glass, security glass, that was so thick that you had to scream and yell in order for the person on the other side to hear you.
Yeah, they didn't have phones in those booths.
No, they did not have no phones in those
Yeah,
booths. You know, so and it was suffocating as well because it really didn't have a lot of air in there as well.
that's for sure.
Here's your disembodied voice again. I just want to let the people in the audience know that we have put Danny's website in the chat, so hopefully that will show up in the room. I'm not sure how that works. You started answering a question that came from the audience as well, which is, what are the conditions on the row like in Pennsylvania? So you talked a little bit about it. We heard about the size of the cell and the heat and no visitors. What else comes to mind?
Air being cut off sometimes, and they always say it's mechanical errors. So therefore, we was in there sweating. The walls were sweating. We couldn't breathe. The air was stale. You had bugs galore, ants, sometimes roaches, spiders. Even one time, we had a little bit of entertainment with a mouse was running across the tier, and everybody was all excited about seeing a mouse running across the tier and see whose cell he was going to end up in. You got people with mental health issues screaming in the middle of the night, banging on the walls. You got guards coming around with batons or keys, banging on a metal gate, to irritate you intentionally. You had guards depriving you of your phone time. We had to sign up to get on the phone list. And when the phone was supposed to be coming to you next, there were no guard to be found. So you banging on the screaming on the door and you pressing the button. The call button was for an emergency. And the guard would come over, is this an emergency? He said, no, man, it's my phone time. And he would say, man, if you press that button again, we're gonna give you misconduct. I said, but what about my phone call? I'm trying to call my family. I'm trying to call my lawyer. They said, we'll get you when we get you. Ain't nobody here right now. You had staff that was very um, dissuasive, from you even wanting to reach out to them for anything because they didn't really want to process your requests, whether it was for a book, whether it was for a meeting so you can change your visiting list, your phone list. And another thing is they had a doctor, when you sign up for sick call, they didn't take you down to the triage room. They came to your cell. So you had to say out loud to the doctor, or it wasn't even a doctor, it was actually a nurse practitioner or something like that, right? Tell them what's wrong with you through the gate. And if you had an embarrassing condition, all of the neighbors were here. And then, when you did get to go down to the triage room to be seen, then you got the guard that's giving you a diagnosis of what you got instead of the dang on medical professional. I'm like, yo, you ain't got no medical degree. What is you doing interfering with this examination here? And then he'll tell you, I can take you back in your cell. So then you had to swallow your pride in order to get medical attention. You couldn't speak up for yourself. And if you did speak up for yourself, you might have got knocked over your head and tackled to the ground like my friend Samuel Randolph. Samuel Randolph, he always spoke up for himself. He's like, I don't belong here. I'm not supposed to be here. And he fought for everything that he was supposed to have, but they didn't want to give it to him. Like phone calls, like the access to the law library, access to the yard, access to the shower. He had to fight them on everything. And what they do, they broke his back and now he can't walk. you know.
Daniel, and a
So
lot of death rows across the country, they leave the lights on all night. Did they turn off the lights at Green?
no, the lights were on 24 hours a day.
Right. I mean, how
And
terrible is that? What's that like?
and they justified it by saying that they needed to be able to see in the cell.
A security risk. They
Yeah,
did
a
it for
security
security.
risk.
That's such horseshit.
Well, and not just a security risk, there's also a health risk because people were killing themselves. And they wanted to make sure that you were still alive, you were still breathing. Sometimes in the middle of the night, while you sleeping there, if they can't see you, they'll bang on the door with the metal flashlight, waking you up, and then flashing the light in there and say, "Oh, okay, I see you," and then keep moving. I mean, they was very disruptive. The light was disruptive. The sounds was disruptive. You were experiencing sensory deprivation. Now,
Or
you might not be
overstimulation too, right?
absolutely overstimulation as well, because there were some things that you were getting too much of, like when people are banging on the walls, banging on the sink and stuff, right? Or banging on the metal gate with their keys or batons. And another bad thing about the confinement was the cell searches. I was afraid to write anything down and keep it in a box because they always try to, make us have limited cell content. But then if you was a targeted individual, they will come in your cell, push you up against the wall, and then come in your cell and ransack it. They will go through each document, reading the documents, and then report to the DA's office or the administration what they found in your cell. Even it might not have been nothing. You got a list of names on there. They'll say it's a list of targets, or you're investigating these people, and you need to inform them that they might be in danger. With some individuals. So it was difficult for me to actually write down my thoughts and keep it there because I wanted to keep a diary, but I was afraid to. One time I did a painting of Obama in my cell, and I got some serious, you know, resistance about that. You
I
know,
have that painting.
yeah. Well, you didn't get the one that they defiled. The first one
I
I
didn't
did.
get the defiled one. Good.
No,
Glad I
no,
didn't get the defiled one, but I'm sorry they defiled one of them.
This is your
Um,
yeah,
voice from the beyond. I have many, many questions, but first I have greetings. Danny, Roland
yes.
sends you a spiritual hug.
Thank
Walter
you.
is here. Walter, and my dog. Sorry.
I thought that was Walter.
No, sorry, the dog would like to say hi as well. Walter Obrot has also been exonerated from death row, and he's here. And he has a question, which I'll get to in a minute. Your friends in Pittsburgh from the PADP group, one of them was a pen pal of yours?
Okay, which one?
I don't know, something about art. I don't remember the name. I'm sorry, but just you can
Was it
wave.
Melanie Taylor
I
or
don't know. Anyway,
Melanie
but
Green?
whoever it is, she says hello,
Okay.
and I'll find out exactly who it is.
Well,
Um,
hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'll
Um,
speak to you later.
there you go. Drexel University Law School has some of Daniel's paintings still hanging. So if you wanted to go over there and take a look, that would be great. And then, let's see, we have many, many more questions. Has there been any disciplinary proceedings against any of the prosecutors who lied?
no, none
No,
whatsoever. And as a matter of
they
fact,
enjoy qualified immunity.
well,
They enjoy.
even beyond that, like they can still get professional disciplinary action from the Bar Association. In
Mhm.
each state has legal ethics, believe it or not, that are supposed to govern lawyers. There have been 550 capital reversals over the course of the years for prosecutorial misconduct, and not a single one of those cases resulted in disciplinary action. Not one. The Innocence Project in New York did an examination of about 660 capital and non-capital cases that were reversed for prosecutorial misconduct, and only one prosecutor ever faced any disciplinary action. That was back in 2016 when they did that, so that data is a little outdated. But I'd eat my hat if there have been any more disciplinary action taken against any prosecutors. It's unbelievable, and that's a big part of the problem is there's no accountability. And if there's no
None.
accountability, we're going to continue to have these prosecutorial misconduct cases. Another reason why, this system is completely unsustainable.
Danny, there's a question here from Walter. He's asking that you talk about Big Dog Boo, I think, changing his medication every other month and how his mental condition changed drastically each time his meds were changed.
Yes, Big Dog was one of the inmates on death row who um, he suffered some serious mental health issues, and he was not being tended to. If anything, he was being experimented on by them constantly changing his drugs. He drank a lot of coffee. He smoked a lot of cigarettes, and um, he would go into fits if he couldn't have no coffee or he couldn't have no cigarettes, no tobacco. I mean, some guards, it got so bad the guard would go around to people's cells asking them for coffee or tobacco so they can calm him down because he would tear his cell up literally because he could not have or he ran out of coffee or cigarettes, you know. And he was the sweetest guy that you would ever want to meet, you know.
Didn't they at one point in time create a mental health block there, that they had so many mentally ill people that they created a mental health block?
Not on death row.
I thought they did.
Everybody that had mental health problem on death row, they stayed right where they were.
Okay.
Yeah. And they would all they would do is they would have a doctor come around and well, it was a doctor or a nurse practitioner. They would come around and they was we're doing a check, to make sure that you haven't strung up. And then they keep moving. They'll ask a bunch of embarrassing ass questions. And who wants to answer questions on the door? And that was one of our complaints was about being on the door talking about your medical condition. I mean, one guy he had HIV, and they had him on the door talking about it. I mean, he fought against it, but even when he was in the medical room talking to the doctor in the privacy of the medical room, the guard would come out and say something to an inmate about that. Be careful, that guy over there, he got AIDS. You know, so there was no real um, mental health help. What they did do was they created the certified peer specialists, which I am today. Certified peer specialists, they were trained in coming around to the doors and doing welfare checks. And these certified specialists were former death row prisoners. Some of them, they also uh, had other inmates that was on actual death row that was trained to talk to us. Even if we were not diagnosed with the mental health issue, they came around to check on us to do a welfare check because they knew the detriment of being in solitary confinement. They knew the effects it was having on us. So whether you was mentally ill or not, they had these people coming around on a daily basis, and they had them available to be on call. So if we needed to talk to one of them, we could press the button and say, "Hey, I need to see one of the CPS workers," and they would let him out, and he would come around and he would talk to you one on one. And they got to a point to where as though they allowed them to pull you out of your cell and take you down to the common room or the triage room so you could sit down and actually talk to them. But this was, around in 2010, around there somewhere, 2010, thereabouts.
So here's the speed round. We're running out of time, and I'm going to read you a few questions, and you can choose which ones you would like to answer. So this is either for Jim or for Daniel. Is it true that there is no cap or minimum on the number of death penalty cases that an attorney can handle, or actually that they can take or be assigned?
I don't, I'm not familiar with there being a cap. There is, we did try to manage that when I was at the CHU. We still had quite high case numbers, but the
Two.
difference between a capital case at post-conviction, which is what I was working on, and a trial case is sometimes post-conviction cases go to sleep for a while and you can work on other cases. I think it would be very difficult to have multiple capital trial cases that you're trying to prepare and litigate at the same time. So I don't know if there's certainly not a statutory limit, but each office has its own um, mechanism for trying to monitor that. But I think in a lot of offices, particularly underfunded public defender offices, sometimes those folks are just completely overloaded and have far too many cases and can't do them all well.
And
So
then
it's a problem.
in the case of court appointed attorneys, I actually remember one woman who got 6 death sentences over a period of 18 months.
Yeah, I mean
She represented a whole slew of people at the same time.
right. And you should have one case over 18 months, maybe two at the most. You just shouldn't have, she should never have been put in that position where she couldn't do. In 18 months, you can't possibly investigate and develop the mitigation cases and any guilt phase defenses for 6 capital cases. That's just insane.
Daniel, what's been most helpful for you since you have come back on the outside? What's been the most helpful in your reentry?
Jim. um, but seriously, my family, they've been very helpful, and my friends. The A lot of the pen pals that I were able to meet throughout my incarceration, I'm still friends with them today. I'm still communicating with them today. I mean, that's how deep that connection that I developed with these people, you know, that they're still with me to this day, you know. Um, and I've been able to, find my peace, my sort of peace, where I can be free, to take a shower whenever I want. It's hot too, or it's cold, and I'd be able to move about in a large bed, so I could be able to have access to all different types of education. I've been teaching myself how to use a computer. I mean, I took a class, but I'm also teaching myself, little things through YouTube.
And you're getting a driver's license.
Yes, I got my learner's permit now. So I am going for my driver's exam tomorrow. Um, I already got my car, but I can't drive it yet. But I got my own apartment. Um, I am self-employed, meaning that I sell my artwork, not online. I just go to festivals or events, and I will have a vending table. So I'm learning how to do that. I'm learning how to reintegrate back into society without becoming crazy like society. You feel me? Because there's a lot of crazy people. I mean,
You've
trying to cross
noticed.
the street as a pedestrian, I had to stop riding my bike because the cars, the people behind these vehicles do not have the respect for pedestrians crossing the street or people riding their bikes down the street.
Welcome to the East Coast, dude.
Okay, how about this one? Danny, the conditions that you survived, the horrible conditions of being incarcerated on death row for all of that time, do you feel like the years that you lost serve a greater purpose today?
Absolutely. Because it allowed me to evolve and grow. I took advantage of the time that I was away. I don't regret losing that time, I don't look back. I only look forward. And when I do look back, I try to suppress the pain, the trauma, the mental anguish that I went through. And I try to remember the positive people, the positive experiences where we were we taught ourselves how to make warm food by making this contraption where you put baking soda and water and you take this electrical appliance, the cord, and then you jerry rig it to um, send this electrical current through the water that will heat it up so you can have warm food. I mean, and to see that there were so many incredible, intelligent individuals who just took a wrong turn or who was subjected to some type of police or prosecutorial misconduct and ended up in that place. They are so talented in there, artists, poets, writers, you know, the magnitude of things that I've seen that these individuals was able to do, if given a chance, they could have been a great contribution to society, and they still can be
Exactly.
if we would reach into those walls and tear down the obstruction that the administration has become to prevent these individuals from growing and reaching out to us and blessing us with their talent.
So you're talking about real redemption. You've seen people who've committed crimes, but
Yes,
yeah, and redemption is real. You see it
yes, it
all the time
is.
with guys on the road, real all the time. Well, that's great. I'm so glad you brought that up because that's really
Yeah,
important for people to understand that guilty
yeah,
or innocent, there's real redemption that goes on behind those walls.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Next
Jim, we have
question.
a. I'm sorry, I have one for Jim. Why do you do this?
It's a passion. I've been doing it a long time, but I got into it because I was opposed to the death penalty. I got exposed to a capital case in law school working with a professor who was handling a capital appeal from Florida and the bug bit. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. And it's been a wild ride, and I've got to meet guys like Daniel. These are the success stories. There's executions as well, and stories that didn't have good endings, but sometimes I've often thought that some of the best experiences I've had and feel like some of the best work I've been involved in was in cases where my guys ended up dead, because of redemption and because of forgiveness that happened with family members and people coming back together again and rallying around somebody. And there was it's been empowering work, you know.
I
You
mean,
never know. I'm
listen,
really only 35 years old. Look at my head. I mean, my hair was brown when
yeah.
I started working with Daniel, and 30 years of working with him, and I look like this now.
Whoa, that make it sound like I aged you. I mean, I know working on my case was very hard and challenging,
Yeah,
but man,
yeah,
I mean, look at I got gray too, you
yeah.
know. But I was going to add to your story, right? I seen some individuals that came out of the system, the corruption, and like Tyree Wallace, this man is out here doing amazing things, going through the community with his organization, cleaning up areas. He's helping people, he's feeding people. You know, I also see Jeffrey Discovic. He's out here. He's giving back. He's reaching in, trying to help individuals that's coming out, or individuals that's still stuck in there, that's trying to get out. That's innocent, that was wrongly incarcerated. I mean, oh my goodness, it was Harold Wilson. Was one of my inspirations because when he got out, he looked back and he reached back in to those prisons, to that death row, and he let us know that he didn't forget about us. He was going around to the churches, to the rallies, to whatever, to talk about, the miscarriage of justice that was taking place, not only in the courtroom, but also behind the prison walls. How those prison administrators was preventing us from educating ourselves, from becoming a better person mentally, physically, and spiritually. You know, so when I see a lot of these individuals come out here and doing amazing things, it tells you that there is hope. There is hope if given a chance for these individuals to be a contribution to our society. Because what's happening now, we got kids running around out here that don't have any respect anymore because their father figures or their parent figures are all incarcerated, or they're too busy struggling on their own to survive, or they might be hooked on drugs themselves, the parents. And so these kids are rudderless, and they're out here um, doing their own thing, trying to find their own selves. One of the things that really disturbed me when I came out here is seeing pre-teens. Some of these girls are not even 16 years old, and they got 2 or 3 babies on their hips. How the hell did that happen?
Okay, we have to wrap up. One comment and then a final question for you. I know that there's been movement in the legislature on a bill that would abolish the death penalty. So I would just like to encourage anyone who is in Pennsylvania to please contact your legislators and tell them that you support abolition. And then, Danny, would you give us information on where we can see your artwork? You have murals all over the city. And then would you just give us the address again of your website?
Okay, my website is www.danielgwynn197.com, com. On there, you'll find my artwork, my story, and maybe some updates about some things that I'm doing.
Tell them what 197 means.
197 is my designation as an exonerated individual. I am the 197th person in Pennsylvania to be exonerated.
Okay, that's amazing. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you'd like to be in touch, you can always contact us at info@padp.org. That's Pennsylvanians Against the Death Penalty, padp.org. We're happy to give you any information that we can. You've got Danny's website. I think we have been able to answer most of the questions, but thank you so much. It's wonderful to hearing from you. And Jim, it's been quite educational.
Thanks for
There's
having me.
one other thing I want
Yes,
to
go for
put
it.
out there. I just come across a bill for compensation for the exonerated that's out there now, trying to drum up some support for. Um, I think it's Representative Young who is behind, pushing this through the legislator.
That would be
So,
great. Delaware just passed a similar law, and Pennsylvania can use one because the problem the guys have right now is that there's so much prosecutorial immunity and state immunity given for this misconduct.
absolutely, there's no accountability. And I mean, when
Exactly.
I got out, there was no resources there for me,
Right?
right? I mean, I had to rely on Jim. I had to rely on my pen pals from across the ocean to help me get on my feet, to give me, you know, um, some footing so I can become the man that I know I can be. So we need to get together, vote for the right people in office, and we need to just shout out the malevolent creatures, the entities that has taken over our society, and shout them down, get them out of office so we can have a better quality of life in prison and outside of prison. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And let me thank again our co-hosts, Amnesty International USA, the Atlantic Center for Capital Representation, the Death Penalty Policy Project, and Witness to Innocence. So thank you all for coming, and I will be able to share this recording online. Just stand by and we will send you an email soon.
Thank you for having me.